Okay, we're going to start on 39b. The topic we've had over the last few days has been the topic of Bikur Cholim. Okay, and it's much discussed. If you ask why is it discussed in the middle of Nedarim, the connection was because we had another Mishnah amongst several others that discussed, is it considered a benefit? Is it considered hana for one person to visit someone who's sick? And obviously the halachic ramifications are if a neder was made. So because the Mishnah discussed one person making a neder against the other person, and now that person who we made a neder against is ill, so is that considered a violation of the neder? For on a little bit of a tangent, on 39b, the Gemara starts off the whole topic, and I just want to read a few lines regarding this. The Gemara asks for the source. Where does it say in the Torah that there's this inyan of Bikur Cholim? Okay, it doesn't really say anywhere specifically. You might be saying, well, the story of Abraham after the bris, and God visits him in the beginning of Vayera. Obviously, that's not a conventional visit. And there's no real, Yaakov was sick and he was visited by his son Yosef and his grandsons. That's also not so clear. So the Gemara pulls out a very, very interesting source. We're on 39b on the third line from the top. So the Torah says, where is there a remez? Now, right away, we should wondering, it doesn't ask for a source, it asks for a remez. A remez we would call what they call a hint, meaning it's nothing specifically written, it's just a hint toward the source. And the Maratz Chayes actually comments that this word remez is interesting because when something is only hinted to and it's not, fully developed in the psukim, so the Maratz Chayes quotes the Rambam, who says that this smells of a halacha l'Moshe Messinai, meaning there are many, many halacha l'Moshe Messinais. There are many laws that we have that don't say anywhere, right, in the psukim at all. For example, the biggest example is the arava that they would do on Hoshana Rabbah, right? Nowhere does it say it. Okay, there's a letter here, there's a letter there, and the Gemara makes a nice drush in Masechah Sukkah, but nowhere does it talk about going around the mizbeach or beating the aravas on the floor. So that's like a classic halacha l'Moshe Messinai, and because we don't have any source, we need to have just a tiny drop, right? We always like to have something very, very minor to rely on. So that's what the Maratz Chayes over here says, that we're about to quote a pasuk, which has nothing to do with visiting the sick, but we just need a little bit to rely on, and then we're going to have our remez. So the pasuk that they find is none other than the story of Korach, right? After the Korach rebellion, so Moshe lets Korach and his peoples know what their destiny is going to be, and he says that either you're going to die a conventional death, or you're going to die the supernatural death that no one has ever died from in the history of the world, and that will show whether or not Moshe am justified, and we're justified in punishing you because of your rebellion. And in the end, of course, we know what happened, that the earth ended up swallowing. But the pasuk actually says, we're on the fourth line, in kamos kol hadam yimutun ele, if these people die a normal death, ufekudat kol adam. Ufekudat kol adam literally means, and their destiny will come like the destiny of so many people in this world who end up dying a natural death. Okay? That means that what? That means that I'm not special, Moshe says, right? God didn't say, right? I'm not special, and you could be the leader, Korach, you may be right, and we'll have no final verdict on this. That's what Moshe said. So the Gemara says, "My mashma." Where do we see visiting the sick in this pasuk? This is like out of left field. What does this pasuk have to do with Bikur Cholim? So the key word over here is ufkudat kol hadam. The Gemara says that the Torah puts that word in again. He says, if Moshe says, if the people are going to die a natural death, like the destiny that is ultimately met by most people. So what does that mean? So the Gemara says, "In kamot kol hadam yimutun ele shehem cholin mutalin ba'arisasan." If these people are going to die like the way normal people die, not normal, like the way standard, right? The standard death is you were, right? You're sick, you end up in bed, and you die, right? That's how it was. There's no nursing home, there's no palliative care, there's no nothing, right? This is how it used to be. You go to bed and you die. That's how it was. And the Gemara says, if these people just end up in their bed sick, uvnei adam mevakrin otan, and people would visit them before they die. That's the word ufekudat, from the word pei kuf dalid pakad, which is one way of explaining this word is to visit. And the visitors come right before they die to visit them. So then the Gemara says, Maha briut, Omrim lo Hashem shlachani. Then if they die a regular death, Korach and his 250 people end up dying in their homes of natural old age, then Moshe says, then I'm not special. God didn't send me. Okay, then there's nothing special about this. And of course we know, and if they end up dying a supernatural death, then we know that God is punishing Korach for his sin in the rebellion. So that's what the Gemara learns, believe it or not, that it's actually the extra word ufekudat, the visit, okay? And I heard a really, really good vart from the Olus Ephraim. I'm not sure who that is. I don't have time to look up who that was, but he says the word ufekudat, for those of you who are linguistics specialists in Hebrew, like I said, the root of the word is pei kuf dalid, which is lifkod or pikudim, right? So it actually has, if you look in Tanakh, there's 4 meanings of the word. The first meaning is, actually, before I continue, I'm going to show you in a minute that there's a different Gemara brought down in Bava Metzia that brings their source for visiting the sick, and we're going to tie that in. So just keep that in mind. So anyway, getting back to Ufekudat, there's a pasuk in Matos after the war, and Moshe says that Lo yipaker ish mimenu, that after the war, nobody was lacking. We didn't lose any people. And he uses the word pei kuf dalid. So it could mean lacking. And lacking, the reason why lacking is a descriptive word when it comes to visiting the sick is because we know the Gemara says that when you visit them, you cause them to lack or to give up 1/60th, right? If you remember the Gemara on Lamates, right after this Gemara on the bottom, it said that each time someone visits, takes 1/60th away of the choli, okay? So that's hinted to in the word pikudas that you are actually removing 1/60th. So that's what one meaning of pikudas is. The other is to remember, like from the pasuk v'Hashem pakad et Sarah, which is probably the most famous use of the word pakad, right? We laying it on Rosh Hashanah, and God remembered Sarah, and they had a baby like Hashem visited the year before. But the word pakad means to remember. And what's the point of that? The point of that is that when we visit, when we're Mekayim the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, we remember ourselves and take it to heart, okay? And this is actually alluded to. There's a very beautiful Ben Yehoyada in Bava Metzia. Why is it in Bava Metzia? Because I said a minute ago that there's actually a second source of this rule, about Bikur Cholim, right? About the law of Bikur Cholim, and I'll read quickly. It's at the end of the second parak in Bava Metzia, Elu Metzios. The Gemara says, Tani Rabbi Yosef, v'hodata lahem es beis chayehem. Right, this is a pasuk in Yisro. It says, v'hodata lahem es beis chayehem es haderech yelchu ba ves masa asher ya'asun. Okay, that's the pasuk written after Matan Torah, which basically says that I will teach them the way to work, the way to go, and the correct path to take. And the Gemara learns out different actions based on each code word in this pasuk. The Gemara says, for example, v'hodata lahem. What does v'hodata mean? So the Gemara says, zeh beis chayehem. This is what? This is a way, okay? This is a way that they should know to make a livelihood, meaning teaching everyone a trade so that they could make a living. This ties back a little to last week where we spoke about that Rambam and working, okay, if you remember that. So this is actually alluded to that they should be taught a way to work. Then it says, then it says, Es haderech, the path, zu gemilas chasadim, that is hinting to the concept of gemilas chasadim. Then the pasuk says Yelchu. Yelchu zeh bikur cholim. Yelchu means to walk to. This is hinting to the reference of bikur cholim. Then it says Ba zu kvura. That's referring to burial, to get for the Chevra Kadisha, to have people involved in burial. Ves maise zehadin. That's judgment. To set up courts. Asher yasun zolif mishur. And it says asher yasun. That means going beyond the letter of the law. So it says yelchu ba, and the Gemara learns from there this concept of the ultimate chesed, which we call the chesed shalames, is dealing with sick people and unfortunately their demise. And the Ben Yehoyada says the Ben Yehoyada goes on to say how important this virtue is. The Ben Yehoyada says, Ki ha'oset bidvarim ha'elu, tia be'einav olam hazeh, b'kinyana hevel. He says, if you really look at it, someone involved in visiting the sick and going into hospitals and dealing with a Chevra Kadisha, and someone who works in this field, you could just imagine, must be very unmaterialistic, right? This is probably one profession of someone who is very, who isn't, pulled by Gashmius in this world, right? He says, someone like this, it's very hard to be very materialistic, says the Ben Yehoyada, right? Because what are you doing? You're involved around burials, around people dying, around sick people. All you're doing all day long is say, eventually I'll be like this. So you get such a cynical, a negative view on life. It's very hard, right, to be materialistic, but rather it makes you remember your Yom HaMisa. Like it says, famous pasuk in Koheles, V'hachai yiten el libo, right? That the living will take it to heart. So that's why what this does is it makes you remember. And that comes from the word Pei Kuf Dalid, Hashem Pakad. That's why the Gemara back in Nedarim says Ufekudat. It uses this word Ufekudat because the second meaning of Ufekudat means to remember. The third comes from it's a pasuk we know from Megillah Esther. It says Vayafked Hamelach Bekidim, right? If you remember that pasuk, it means to appoint. So it's a third translation, a third meaning of the word poked, right? Because when we visit, right, you're not just there to talk to, but you're appointing. You're like a shliach. You are there, and the Gemara discusses about you just can't go there and schmooze and say what's going on and talk, and talk about rubbish. You have to actually be helpful. You have to help with what they need. You have to be active. It's not good to just sit there, lay back, and and just talk. So you have to be active. You have to appoint yourself someone important enough to help the sick person. And that's a reference to, or that's a reminder from the word Vayafked HaMelech, that like Achashverosh appointed. So that's what the word Pei Kuf Daled also comes from. And the last one comes from Parshas Kitisa, is the word, it comes from the word to count, right? The pasuk says, Kol ha'over al ha'pikudim, right? Regarding the machatzit shekel, when God counted us, he gave us the commandment of giving a half a shekel. So the count is called pikudim. So that's another translation of the word pikudim. And what that means is, what does it mean to count? That when we visit the sick, we reinforce this concept that this person is still counted amongst us. He's not a has-been, he still is, right? He, she still is existing, and he's part of us, no different than anybody else who's not sick. So I just thought that that was a very beautiful interpretation of this seemingly abstract, obscure reference in Korach to visiting the sick people. So I thought that was very beautiful, and that is from the Olos Ephraim. So the Gemara goes back and forth. I wanted to hone in on another technical point that the Gemara makes. In the Agadah, I'm going to switch. I'm going to fast forward from Lamed Tes to Daf Mem, and on Mem, the Gemara starts on the 6th line or so, on 40a on top. Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva would darshan the Rabbi Akiva had a drasha, Kol mi she'ein mevaker chol kilu shofech damim. The Gemara is talking about how important it is. It exaggerates to a point and says that if you don't do it, it's as though you're committing murder. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says, and we know that every time, the Gemara likes to exaggerate a lot just to prove a point or to show how great or how ungreat some stuff are. So we always stress that. And the Gemara says, Kiyasa Ravdimi, when Ravdimi came, Amar, he said, Kol ha'mavakar esachola gorim lo sheyichya. Whoever visits the sick causes that person to live. V'chol she'eno mavakar esachola gorim lo sheyamus. And if you don't, you are causing to die. So you're actually causing to live by visiting, and by not visiting, the Gemara says you're causing him to die. So the Gemara says, what exactly does that mean? My grandma. So let's take this path. Let's try this path, the Gemara says. Does it mean that anyone who visits the chola and davens that he should live, right? That's virtuous, right? Then he'll live. So someone who doesn't visit, does that mean that he's at home? Not only is he not visiting, he's praying that the person die? Gemara says that's ridiculous. Why would you think that just because he didn't go means that he would prefer the person to die? That doesn't make any sense. So Gemara says, if you abstain from doing birka cholim, what you do is you blow the opportunity, okay, to have your voice heard. And the Mefarshim discuss that sometimes there's a period in the time where God is extra sensitive to our prayers, and you not praying and getting involved, and you are potentially not piling on. We have all these Tehillim groups, and everybody chats back and forth. What parak are they doing? So you see, the point is to get everybody involved as much as possible. And by you abstaining, what you're doing is you're losing the opportunity to either help positively, or the Gemara ends off by saying, or you're not doing enough so that he could die. So the Gemara doesn't really explain what that last word means, because it sounds like there is a possibility for your prayers to help for the person to die. So Does that mean what we think it means? So the Ran says it actually does. This is a very controversial Ran. It's brought, I've seen it in various articles regarding, controversial issues like assisted suicide and back in the Kevorkian days when this was a much discussed topic. I'm sure it still is, about pulling the plug and things that we're not really going to discuss now because I'm certainly not qualified to comment on it. The only thing is, I just want to raise your attention to the Ran, because the Ran actually interprets this Gemara literally, that by not davening, you're missing the opportunity for your tefillas to be heard either positively for life or negatively, because sometimes, unfortunately, it is better. I don't want to use the word better. It is preferred. It is preferred for a person to be put out of their misery. And I don't say this, it's the Ran saying it. So look on the left side. It's the very first line in the Ran. There are times when it is proper for people to pray for someone to die. When is that? If she is suffering beyond what's considered normal, and it's impossible to live, meaning the doctors wrote them off, and not only did they write them off, because coma is a whole separate discussion whether they feel pain or not. I'm not going to get into it, mostly because I wouldn't know what I'm talking about. But if someone is in pain, so that's when the whole pulling the plug at least comes into play over here. Or are you allowed to pull the plug in Shamayim? And if you think that the Ran doesn't have a source, you're mistaken, because the Ran has a source. And not only that, we actually discussed this a long time ago, about a year ago. And I mentioned that when we get to Nedarim, we'll talk about it. So all those who remember from about a year ago, I am talking about it now. It's the story of Rebbe. When Rebbe Yehuda Hanassi reached his end, he was in constant pain. And if you remember the Gemara, it talks about the maidservant went up to the roof, and she cried out, and because she saw the kind of pain he was in, that he was going to the bathroom every 5 minutes, and he had to take on his tefillin, he had to put off his tefillin, and she just couldn't handle it anymore. So in the yeshiva, they were praying for him to live. She was praying to die, for him to die. And up there in heaven, they were confused. They didn't know who to listen to. So that's what the Ran says over here. Ran says, Kivan the Chaze Amsa the Rebbe Dal Kama Zimnin Lebeis Kise. He went to the bathroom, Vanach Tfilin, become it star Amri Hi Ratzon. Her tefillah, believe it or not, was Yihi Ratzon Sheakofu Ha'Elyonim Esatachtonim, which basically means they want him upstairs. But the problem is the people downstairs also wanted him. So it was this proverbial tug of war. So she prayed that they went upstairs and they grab Rebbe and bring him up. Klomar delirmus Rebbe. So Rebbe should die. And if you remember what happened, she ended up throwing something over the roof, and they made a noise, and they stopped davening for a second. And once they stopped davening, he died. So that's what the Ran over here says. That's what we were saying over here. When you're a mavakar the chole, when you do something positive, when you visit a sick person, his tefillah helps. Because that's a nicer kind of davening. It's a more preferred type of prayer, a positive prayer. And someone who doesn't visit, who sits home and doesn't visit, not only are you contributing for him not to live longer, but are you abstaining and losing that opportunity, right, for God to listen. Even if everybody agrees that this person is better off, it's hard to say it this way, but that's what the Ran says. If everybody unanimously says that this person is better off dead because they are just suffering too much, So even staying at home doesn't help. So you're not contributing either way. So that's what the Ran explains our Gemara. Of course, it's very controversial, whether it should be taken literally. There's much talk about it. I really don't want to talk about it that much. I just brought it up just for you to know that there is this concept that sometimes, even though we're a religion of we don't normally, decide when it's time to go, when it's people time to go. We don't take it into our own hands generally. But when it comes to praying, that's the one exception where we're allowed to say to God, in our humble opinion, enough is enough. So that's what I'll say about that discussion. Okay, the Gemara, and I'm going to pick a third piece because there's just, there's a lot of just tidbits here and there. And I thought I'd pick something a little bit off the topic that the Gemara alludes to for no real apparent reason, other than there's a continuation of Ravin. The Gemara has a lot of statements made by one Amora named Ravin. So on 40b is a very, very small page. It has a total of 5 lines. So 2 lines from the bottom, the Gemara starts off by saying, Amar Rabbi Ami Amarav, Mai Dechsiv. We're going to learn a pasuk from Yechezkel. All right, the pasuk in Yechezkel says the following: Ve'ata ben Adam aselacha klei gola. So Yechezkel 12 is the parak where Hashem says, there's going to be a destruction, and I want you to get a feeling of what Golus is going to look like. Beis Hamikdash is going to get destroyed. I want to give you like a dry run. Right? I want you to feel right now, before it's destroyed, what Golus is going to look like. So Hashem tells Yechezkel to make yourselves to make yourself clay gola, vessels, right? Kalim that is something that you would take with you to Golus. All right, so that's what the Gemara says. So what are some kalim that we would take to Golus? So the Gemara says, Zuner uka'ara v'shatiach. These are like the basic necessities that you need to survive. Like if you were going outdoors, right? If you're going in one of these overnights, right, or one of these survival trips, right? You take basic necessities to survive, right? So what did Yechezkel take? He took a ner, a light, ka'ara, and a shatiach, a plate, and a shatiach, which is like a carpet, like a placemat, something to sit on, something to put your food on. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says. From there, the Gemara takes a leap and says, well, because we're talking about essential items, it's going to quote a pasuk from Devarim Kavches. The next word, so we're on the first line of 41a. The Gemara says, Bechoser kol. Okay, these are 2 words from a pasuk. I want to quote the whole pasuk because this is a pasuk. It's a very, very depressing pasuk. Not only is it depressing, this pasuk doesn't get much fanfare because, first of all, it's in Kisavo. It's all the way at the end in the Tochacha. Right, the Tochacha appears twice in the Chumash. It appears in Bechukosai at the end, and then there's a double Tochacha in Kisavo. A lot of psukim. That the only reason why we know it is because the Balkora laning it goes very fast and he's very low. You can't barely hear him. So, there's different ways of looking at it. So do we want to hear the Tochacha? Yeah, we want to hear, but we don't want to hear it too much because it's not a good thing to say. So it's read very rapidly, and it's a lot of really nasty, bad stuff. And the Mefarshim say that all of these bad things actually happen in Jewish history. If you go to every single pasuk, we're not going to do it now, but every single thing that God promised in the Tochacha happened. All right. So here's something that says in the Tochacha. It says, it's actually in the beginning of the Tochacha, Perek 28, verse 48. Well, before we get to verse 48, the Torah says that you're not going to listen and you're going to get destroyed. And it says the reason why this is happening to you is because Tachas Shelo Avarata Es Hashem Elokecha B'Simcha Uv'Tov Levav U'Merov Kol. God tells us the reason why we're getting destroyed and going into Galus is because we didn't serve God b'simcha, okay, and with a good heart after having everything. We were very, very satiated. In fact, we were too satiated. That's why we rebelled. The Gemara discusses that elsewhere. We're not going to get into that part, but let's look at the next pasuk. Va'avarata es oivech. Pasuk 48 says, and you shall serve your enemy, Asher yishalchenu Hashem bach, that God will send to you. So we're going to be in Galus. We're going to be serving our enemy. How are we going to be serving our enemy? Not with joy, but bira'av, u'b'tzama, u'be'erom, u'b'choser kol. We'll be hungry, we'll be thirsty, we'll be naked, and we'll be pretty much lacking everything. All right? V'nasan ol barzel al tzavarecha ad hishmido osach. And we'll have the yoke, this iron yoke on our neck, until this enemy destroys us. Very, very bad, depressing, okay, horrible pasuk, which most of us are not familiar with, but it still exists, right? It's equal to all the other psukim. And the Gemara over here wants to know what the pasuk say. We're going to serve our enemy with hunger, with thirst, when we're naked, u'b'choser kol, which basically means lacking everything. We're gonna not have anything. Okay, so what does it mean we're not going to have anything? What are we going to be missing? So Amar Rabbi Ami Amar Rav below ner. Rav says we're not going to have a ner, which is, by the way, what he said before. Remember when Yecheskel, the whole story, right? The whole clay gola. So that's what Rav said. He's going to have to carry with him something, right, on his dry run to Golus. He's going to take with him on his survival trip an air, right? So that's why Rav over here says something that's vital to someone is a light. Without a light, you can't see. Without a ner and without a shulchan. Those are the things that are going to be lacking. Rav Chisda Amar below Isha. Rav Chisda says you're going to go to Golus without a wife. Rav Sheshes Amar below Shamash. Rav Sheshes says without a slave to serve you. Rav Nachman Amar below Deya. Says Rav Nachman, you're going to go without Deya, without knowledge. Tana, we learn in a Brisa, below Melach, below Ravav. You're going to be going without salt and without sauce. Okay, that's what Ravav is. Rashi says shomen, fat, right? Things to spice up your meat. So what does that mean? So the Marsha explains this Gemara beautifully. The Marsha says, if you look at the Gemara is quoting this pasuk. Again, the pasuk says you're going to go serve your enemy, right? How are you going to serve him? With hunger, thirst, naked, right? You're going to be, and you're going to lack everything. So the Marsha says, "U'lefi pshuto u'bechoser kol hainu kol davar." It's almost like the question is, why does the Torah have to go into detail about hunger and being naked and being thirsty? The pasuk says you're going to be lacking everything. So why do I need? It's like a klal and a prat. Why do I need the general to say you're going to have nothing? And also, not only are you going to have nothing, you're not going to have clothing. Well, of course, isn't that under the category of lacking everything? So that's the way the Marsha learns this Gemara, almost like in question format. So why does the Torah have to say specific details? Because it's all subjective. Everybody has something, right? It's like when they say if your house is burning down and you have 10 seconds, right? What's the first thing you're going to save? So one guy is going to get his, his antique shas. Some guy's going to save his jewelry. Someone who's going to go save his 52 mantle, right? Everybody has something in their house that's precious to them, that if they only had 10 seconds to go save something, one thing, right? I'm going to save that thing. So that's what the Marsha is going on over here. He says, Lamarka de Islay, Ulamarka de Islay. Every one of these Amoraim said the thing that's most important to them. For example, Rav Sheshes. We know that from other Gemaras that Rav Sheshes was blind. So to a blind person, what's the most important thing? Right? Your seeing eye dog, your guide, your shamus. So that's why Rav Sheshes says this is the most important thing that you're going to lack. So it's not just having no clothes and being hungry and being thirsty. It's everybody has their own thing that they deem the most right. So Nachman says below Dea, without knowledge, because Rav Nachman, to him, knowledge was everything. Because Rav Nachman was a judge, right? He was, the Gemara discusses elsewhere, that he was a judge that went into the depth, right? And he paskined for everyone. So he had to know, he had to have the most understanding in order to judge cases. So all of these interpretations are based on their personal preference. So that being said, so we see that one thing that you don't have is considered choser kol. It's considered like, if I don't have one thing, then I have nothing, right? Missing one thing, that one vital thing to you, can turn your life upside down, right? It's interesting. I heard a word a long time ago. There's a Gemara in Chulin, I think it's Daf Kuf Lamed Tes, that says, where do we see the context of the Gemara? It says Haman min haTorah minayim. Right? The Gemara asks three questions. How do you know Moshe from the Torah? How do you know Haman from the Torah? And how do you know Mordechai from the Torah? This is the Gemara in Chulin. So the Gemara says, well, Moshe before he was born in Parsha Shmos. So where's there a remez, right? We spoke about a remez. So where's there a hint in the Torah of Haman? Haman's not in the Torah. Haman's in Megillah Esther. How does Haman belong in the Torah? So you know where it's hinted? So the Gemara says, because it says in the pasuk in Parshas Bereshis, Hamin ha'etz, right? After Adam Harishon is nailed by God, right, for eating from the tree, God says, Hamin ha'etz asher tziviti. Right? Didn't I tell you not to eat from the tree? So what is the connection between Adam eating from the tree and Haman HaRasha? So I heard of a long time ago, I don't remember who says it. What was Adam's sin? Adam's sin was he was given the pick of the litter. He had everything to choose from. He had animals. He couldn't eat meat, but he had all trees. He had all vegetables. He had every single thing in the world given to him. And the only thing that he wanted was the only thing that he couldn't get, right? All the trees, 1,000,000 trees he could have had. The one tree that he couldn't have is the one he ended up eating the fruit from, right? That was his downfall. What was Haman's downfall? Haman was in the good graces of King Achashverosh, and he had him by his, coattails, and anything Haman wanted, he could have had. Everybody was bowing down to him. There was one lousy Jew in Shushan named Mordechai who decided not to bow down. It irked Haman so much, he couldn't handle it. So he went out and he said, I'm going to destroy everyone. Fast forward 6 or 7 chapters. In the end, we all know what happened to Haman. That was his downfall, right? So we see a very crystal clear connection between wanting just a little bit more than you need by Adam and wanting just a little bit more than you need by Haman. I think that's a beautiful, comparison. And we see over here, if it's one thing that you don't have, that could destroy you. And that's exactly why each one of these Amoraim had to pick their preference. Without that, I'm finished. I think that's a very beautiful shot. And on that concept, I wanted to actually tie in, coincidentally, we had this a few weeks ago in Parshas Chayesara by the Amor Ma'at Vaseh Harbeh. We had a Dvar Torah coincide with the daf of the week. And we're going to have that today also. Right, Parshas Vayishlach in the middle has after Esav and Yaakov meet up. So there's a very interesting pasuk that says after Esav met everyone and Yaakov was about to give the gifts, he saw that Esav wasn't going to kill him at the end of the day, So in Perek Lamed Gimel, chapter 33, verse 9, right after Yaakov is about to present his presents to Esav, the pasuk says, "Vayomer Esav yesh li rav." Esav says, "I have a lot. I have so much." Right? Achi, hey Yaakov, my brother, yihiyeh lecha ashelach. Right? Let what you have remain yours. I don't need your camels. I don't need your donkeys. I had so much, it's coming out of my ears. You keep what you have, and I'm fine. Okay. Next pasuk. Okay. Yaakov answers and he says, "No, I pray, do me a favor, accept this gift." Okay. And then he says, "Take my blessing, or accept my, I'm sorry, kachnat berchati asher huvatalach." Right. That's a different discussion. So Esav says, Yaakov says, "Take my bracha, okay, accept my present, which has been brought to you, ki chanani elokim, because I'm a little bit like you also. You think you have all the money in the world? I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself," says Yaakov, "because God had given me chen. God blessed me, and he says, v'cheyesh li kol, and I have also plenty. You have plenty, and I have plenty." And the Kli Yakar, who I love quoting, if you haven't figured that out by now, the Kli Yakar says something beautiful, and this has been said in almost every sermon in America, I'm sure over the last 100 years. I'm going to say it again because it ties in beautifully to what we just discussed about Choser Kol and what it means to have everything or almost everything. So the Kli Yakar says, look at the word that Esav used. Esav says, Yesh li rav. He says, I have so much. It comes from the word rov. I have so much. Yaakov says, I also have so much. But he didn't say I have so much that way. He says, I have everything. Right? Technically, there's a difference between having everything and having so much. Because the truth is, if you have everything, then you don't need anything more. If you have so much, you could always use a little bit more. And that's exactly the definitional difference between Yaakov and Esav. And that's why their paths diverged. I'm going to read the Kli Yakar. This is a refrigerator Kli Yakar. Vayomer Esav yesh, that means you put it on. The old days when it was magnetic, you'd put a magnet on. Now they're paneled, so you can't really put, notes on refrigerators without a magnet. Anyway, not important. So the Gemara. So I'm sorry. So Kli Yakar says, Mashma Rav avalo kol. When it comes to Esav saying yesh li Rav, he says, I have so much, but I don't have everything. V'Yaakov amar ki chanani elokim v'yesh li kol. L'fisha harishayim afal pi sheyesh lehem kol kesef v'zahav sheba olam. The wicked people, they may own all the gold and silver and everything. Mikol mako nira lehem shadayim hem chaserim. They're still lacking a little bit. There's always more, right? The person worth $25 billion, he wouldn't be so bad, right? He could use another billion or two. That's why he's working all the time. He's not retired, right? He's working because 25 billion may be enough, but I could use 27 billion. I need to increase my net worth by a little bit more. Okay? So that's when it comes to Nir Lehem Shadayin Hem Chaserim. V'yesh Lehem Rav. They have so much, avalo kol tzarchom. They don't have everything that they need. Lakach Amar Esav yesh li Rav. Avalo ken ki yadayim chaserim hema. He's stressing the fact that he has still so much, but he's still missing a little bit. Yesh biyado mana misavalo matayim. Person has 100, he would love 200, right? You have 100 million, you would want 200 million, right? Whatever the end of that 100 is, you always want 200. V'hatzadikim behefach. Tzadikim are the opposite. Ki afilu im yesh ma'at biyadam, because even if they have a little, hemistapkin bo usmechen bechelkam. They're the classic sameach bechelko, and they don't need it anymore. It's magic. It's as though they have everything, right? They drive an Oldsmobile, right? They whatever. They don't appear to be wealthy, but you know what? If they're happy and they don't need any more to survive, right? then Kli Yakar explains they're on a higher level than someone who's always attaining to gain more. Right? And he quotes the famous pasuk in Koheles, Gam Kol Adam Esher Nasan Lo Elokim Osher Nechasim. Right? He's got everything, but yet he's still not happy. All right, he goes on and on to explain, but I think that's a beautiful concept of this kol, right? So like our Gemara says, there are certain things that you need, right? And then above and beyond, if you're missing what you unrelated, this is very similar, this concept of kol, right? Sometimes kol could be just a little bit, that little extra that makes you from satisfied to not satisfied, right? Sometimes it's a little thing, and that's the, right, what they call the tipping point. Okay, so I thought that was beautiful, a connection to Dvar Torah from Vayishlach. You don't get that all the time.
I don't know if you saw the Olot Ephraim is the Kli Yakar.
Excuse me?
The Olot Ephraim I wrote in the chat is the Kli Yakar.
Oh, it is? Okay. Okay, great. So that's two Klei Yakarim, or Klei Yakar. I don't know. We'll talk about that next time. But anyways, I wanted to continue this Gemara because I happen to really like the next line. It's a very, very deep line, right? What was the line? We said Rav Nachman says, the one thing, right? What is Choser Kol? What's that one thing? What's that item that you're going to be lacking in Golus? So Rav Nachman says you're not going to have Deya. Okay, you're not going to have understanding, intelligence, knowledge. You're going to be missing it. And without that, forget it. You're not going to have anything. So Amr Abaya says Naktina. Naktina means we have a Masorah. And Ani Elabedeya. Very, very crucial line. Poverty, the definition of poverty is not to be taken literally. Poverty is all in your head. Meaning what? Meaning it doesn't mean literally lacking money, lacking begadim, lacking food. No. An ani is someone who doesn't have the right intelligence and understanding to improve his situation. Okay, that's what Abaya says. Continuing on, B'marava Amri, in Eretz Yisrael, they'd say the following: Didabe Kulabe. This was actually a song that maybe 15, 20 years ago. I'm not sure if it was Mordechai ben David or Avram Fried, one of them. They made a song from this line in the Nedarim. I'm not sure people actually knew where it came from, but it actually comes from here. It says, Didabe Kulebe, Udolabe Mabe, which basically means, Rashi says, Misha yesh bo das, Misha yesh bo hakol, she'eno nechsar klum. All you need, right? The Beatles said, all you need is love, right? Abaya says, all you need is not love, all you need is knowledge. That's the only thing you need. When you have knowledge, okay, when you have understanding, okay, and knowledge, that is all you need, because everything else flows from that. That's what this line means. Again, the dabe, if you have this, da is a very strange word. Da in Aramaic is this. Then you have everything. If you have this, i.e. understanding, then you have everything. The lo dabe, mabe. If you don't have this, then what do you have? Da kani machaser, right? One who acquired wisdom is not missing anything. Da lo kani, if you didn't acquire it, you don't have knowledge, you don't have understanding, makani, then what do you have? You have nothing. All right? So it would be a shame not to discuss this. So I want to start off, okay, with a unbelievable Ben Yehoyada I saw on this Gemara. Okay, it's a very strange word, right? The word da. So says the Kli Yakar, nearly al pi haremes haramos ba'osios adam. He says, take the word Adam. What is Adam? Aleph, Daled, Mem. Okay? Shehu Roshe Tevos, Emuna Das Malach. The Ben Yehoyada says the word Adam is a notarikun, right? I'm sorry, is an acronym for Emuna, Das, and Malacha. Got that? Emuna, dat, and malacha. V'hainu ki ha'adam la'amul yulad. Why were we born? We were born to toil. We were born to get dirty, right? To work. Okay. What we do, again, this ties beautifully to last week also, coincidentally, or maybe not. What we do in this world is called malacha. That's what we do to survive. Our love is dependent on two criteria. There are two variables. One of them is our knowledge, meaning in order to work, we have to have knowledge. We have to be educated. We have to go to a certain school. We have to have an experience in order to attain a profession, right? Quotes pasuk from Mishlei. Because if a person is insane and has no knowledge and he can't hold himself together, then he's worthless and he can't work, right? And he loses the business that he has. That's the first thing you need. The two criteria. The first thing is you need knowledge. Then we get a little bit religious. Then we have to have something called emuna, okay, which you all know about. Then God will provide for him. But what's first? Okay, tying back to the Rambam a little bit again last week, right? You can't put emuna before knowledge, right? You can't go into something and say, I'm gonna have emuna that I'm gonna become a lawyer, and I'm not gonna go to law school. I'm not gonna take the LSATs. I'm gonna do whatever, and then I'm gonna wake up one day and I'm gonna be a partner in Wachtel Lipton. Okay, this doesn't happen because we need first das. After das, the Ben Yehuda says, then we need emuna, but it has to be in that order. Okay. Okay, and then he goes on to say, Ulachen kidmu b'shem Adam emuna das kodem mem shel malacha. Let's get back to the Adam. Remember what Adam was? It was emuna, das, and malacha. So therefore, the emuna, right? The aleph comes before the mem of malacha. Lirmoz im yesh Adam shtayim shem emuna das as yesh malacha. Those are the two ingredients necessary, right? For malacha, you need emuna and you need das. Shehu iske olam hazeh sheyiskayim biyado. V'imlo tabed malacha. Without that, you're not getting higher. Okay, no, you're not going to be successful. Says the Ben Yehuda, nimtza das ve'emuna rumazim ba'otiot. Now, what are the letters of das and emuna? Das is Dalid, emuna is Aleph. Oh, what does Dalid Aleph spell? Da. Remember a minute ago, I said, what is this word da be? Right, this, why is this Aramaic? He says the Dalid is the Das, and the Aleph stands for emuna. Says the Ben Yehuda, Remuazim the Osios da, Tishem Adam Lazeh Amar da be. If you have Dalid Aleph in you, Das and emuna, as kula be. Then you have, in, as they say, in ganzen. Then you're complete. Sheish logam os mem shel malacha. Then you're ready for malacha, right? Udlo dabe. If you don't have the dalat aleph, das emuna mabe, you have nothing. Dim ein ad dim, and he ends off by saying dim ein das emuna gam malacha einmo. You're not going to have malacha. A very beautiful Ben Yehoyada about why the Gemara says the word da be, dalat aleph. So we say, where we come from, we say knowledge is power, right? That actually comes from a book by Sir Francis Bacon, right? Some people attribute it to Thomas Jefferson, but he was the one who said that knowledge is power, because the truth is all of our achievements and our reputation and our legacy and everything that we have inside of us emanates from knowledge, as the Gemara just says. Without knowledge, and the Ben Yehuda spells it out, without it, we're not going to be successful. We're not going to achieve. We're not going to get to the Amuna stage if we don't have that knowledge. So it's interesting. I looked up the definition of the word intelligence. So I looked in the Oxford Dictionary, and you ready for what the Oxford Dictionary says the definition of intelligence is? Intelligence. One, the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. Okay, again, the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. So where do you think Oxford got this definition from? So from those who've been following this class for about 2 years know that, what's the theme? The theme is that everything comes from the Gemara. So I believe Oxford actually took this from a Gemara in Kiddushin. Gemara in Kiddushin discusses the concept of honoring the elders, right? Stand up for them, right? It says v'hadarta p'nei zaken and u'b'nei seva taku, right? Stand up for the elderly. So the Gemara in Kiddushin Lamed Beis says Tanu Rabbanan mipnei seva takum. Okay, this is a famous Gemara. It's amongst the Gemara that talks about kibbud av v'em and honoring different types of people. So it says mipnei seva takum. The pasuk in Kedoshim says you should stand up in front of the seva, the elderly. So the Gemara says, I might think that if he is a simple person, right? You don't have to. Talmud Lomer zaken vein zaken ela chacham. The word zaken is someone who's smart, who's a chacham. Shenemar esfali shiva vish meziknei Yisrael. Okay, so that's what one opinion is. Says Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer ein zaken ela misha kana chachma. The definition of a zaken isn't someone collecting Social Security, isn't someone above 64 and a half. A zaken can be 12. It's anyone who has acquired wisdom. Shenemar Hashem Kananani Reshis Darko. The pasuk in Mishlei says, the Lord acquired me at the beginning of his way, from the word kinyan. So if you look in Rashi says, how do you know that the word zaken is analogous to Misha Kana Chachma? What does it have to do with each other? How do you know that a zaken has to do with Chachma? So Rashi says very simply, Rashi says, V'lasho no tariko and dibur hakasuv. Because the word zaken is what we call an acronym, right? Like we have acronyms like Tanakh, is Torah, Nevi'im, Kesuvim, right? Gemach, Gemilos Chasadim. So the word zaken is an acronym for Zeh Kana Chachma, or is it? So we've heard this before, but have you ever asked yourself if it really is an acronym? Zaken, right? Zeh Kana. Where does the Chachma? Has anyone ever asked themselves this question? So we may have asked it and left it unresolved, but believe it or not, the Pnei Yehoshua asked this question. One of the marvelous Achronim, right? The great Achronim, who has a commentary on Kiddushin, says, I don't understand. I'm looking at the word, and there's no word Chachma. I'm going to read it. This is an unbelievable Pnei Yehoshua. U'lechoira melasho no tariko no shamin and el zeh kana. Yeah, the acronym is Zeh Kana, Zaken, Zayin Kuf Nun, Zeh Kana. He says, Avalakati ein kan remes al shekana chachma. Maybe it means one who acquired books, one who acquired money. Where does the word chachma fit into this? So here's his punchline. El mishum, because the truth is, mishum da aminan ba'alma, da kani ma chaser, u da chaser ma kana. He quotes our Gemara that we had 10 minutes ago in Nedarim, and it says, right, kani. Once you have acquired this, then what are you lacking? And what are we talking about? Because the default of acquiring, what do you think you're acquiring? The only thing you could acquire is like the Gemara says over here. All you need, right, is not love. All you need is knowledge. And once you have knowledge, everything else emanates from that. That's why the no tarikun doesn't have to say chachma. because the Pnei Yosha says, what else do you think we're talking about? All you need is to say Kinyan. And without saying anything else, Zekana has to be Chachma, because that's what the Gemara in the Nedarim, as we just stated, is talking about, right? It doesn't say the word Chachma, it says Dedabe. Once you have this one thing, and it doesn't say Chachma, but it's inferred. So to over here, that's why Rashi says, Rashi is correct, Zekana, right, means by default that we're talking about Chachma. And that does it. Wow, we ended exactly on time, as usual. And whatever, it's a very beautiful concept. And there's a lot more I saw, but we will leave it at that.